They really had a mission and what they wanted to get done and what they were trying to accomplish. And I think they accomplished the most that they wanted to going forward with a style of play that looks like it's already been implemented based on what this coach's philosophies are.
It was actually Chicago who had that third pick in the NWSL draft, and they traded it away for Sam Staub, which is a huge get for the Red Stars. But they missed out on Croy Bethune.
Chelsea has already stated, we already know Emma Hayes is coming. They would like to keep the locker room and the attitude and everything the same, and they think a woman coach is what they need to continue their progression forward. And we have two of the best sitting here in the U.S.
Adding a player from Wolfsburg is huge for the NWSL. Germany's not a piece off the top of my head, really, that I don't think we've been able to see how that fits in the system. And I think that's good for future players who have been thinking about it. If she has a great experience in North Carolina, we could see more in the near future. Welcome back into Straight from the Pitch, joined as always by Scotty Schweitzer. I'm Anna Witte. We hope everyone had a wonderful Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It is now 2024. NWSL and MLS are weeks away from kicking off their season. And for the NWSL, they just wrapped off their 2024 draft this past week. We're going to break it down and get into all of the exciting picks, the amount of talent that's coming out of the college game, especially from the defensive and midfield position, is extremely impressive. Before we get into the draft a little bit more, let's just recap what the top 10 picks of the draft were. So the first one was Ali Sitnor, UNC is going to Utah. Savvy King, also from UNC, is going to the Bay. Croy Bethune from Georgia is going to DC. Brecken Mozingo from BYU is headed to Utah. Hal Hirschfeld from Clemson is headed to DC. Raylan Turner out of UCLA, who is a big pick for racing, is headed over to Louisville. And Kate Wiesner from Penn State's going to DC. Maya Doms from Stanford's going to the Bay. Ali Lemos from UCLA is going to Orlando. And Leilani Nesbitt from FSU is headed over to Chicago. A lot of depth, a lot of trades, a lot of movement throughout the day on Friday. So we weren't really able to predict really far out who we thought was going where necessarily. But when you look at the draft and you're not looking at free agency, you're not looking at who's already on the teams in these certain cities, which team to you, Scotty, made out the best?
I personally think DC did a really good job. That they got Croy Bethune from Georgia and then the girl from Clemson who seemed like she was the reason Clemson got as far as they did. She was just a stalwart in the midfield. She did all the dirty work. She also started plays offensively. But I think with Croy Bethune, me personally, I thought she was the most talented pro-ready player coming into the draft. I just think her talents, her specialties really fits the NWSL style. And then when you put that with the coach from Barcelona that will be at DC's new style of play, I think they really had a mission and what they wanted to get done and what they were trying to accomplish. And I think they accomplished the most that they wanted to going forward with a style of play that looks like it's already been implemented based on what this coach's philosophies are, even though he hasn't been there just yet.
Yeah, you brought up a great topic. The Jonathan Heraldes, the former Barcelona head coach, is headed over to DC after Barcelona's season ends in June. So the first 3 months of NWSL season, they'll have an interim head coach who is yet to be named. But like you said, I think they've done a really good job of implementing and bringing in players who fit that system. And I agree. Washington, in my opinion, made out the best in the draft. They got Croy Bethune and they traded up for her. They got Kate Wiesner, who's a proven outside back from Penn State. Hal Hirschfeld. McKenna Morris, a very fast outside backer. She could even be a winger, I think, in this DC system. And Anna Pottigil, all the way down at the bottom. I know she suffered an injury at the end of her season at Arkansas, but she's a proven player in the SEC. So I think this DC team made it out. But I want to bring up one piece of Bethune. She had 3 ACL tears and 1 knee throughout her entire life so far. There's a little bit of an injury concern there for me specifically because she came back in somewhat of the middle of the 23 season from that last ACL injury. But when you're Heraldes or you're even Krikorian, are you nervous at all about that injury and what might happen this year?
I think you have to be a little bit and understanding that, but you're also looking at a player who's come back from 3 ACL injuries, and it's not easy to come back from one. So you got a determined, hardworking player that loves this game and will go through anything. So like that character, and I think there was a lot of great players, and the NWSL has proven that they really have some really good characters, good people that play in the league. So I think that that's one of the things you should be looking at when you're putting your team together is not just their talent on the field, but who they are as individuals. Like how much are they invested in the team itself, not in their own personal accolades. So yeah, you're concerned about it. Um, Injuries are injuries. They happen. They pop up. They're all over. You could get them in practice. You can get them in just playing. You can get them at home doing silly things. So it is something we have to be aware of because she's had three, but has she done the rehab so much that now her quad muscles and everything are so strong that she's rehabbed back? Have they done different type of surgeries? Have they pulled from the hamstring the first time and then the second time maybe from a different part of her or from a different part of the knee or from a different person? So you got to have
Right.
those kind of concerns. But I think being able to come back from three and then just keep persevering and still being the player that she was and is, I think, yes, there's a concern, but I think it's a risk worth taking, especially Washington now is going into a whole different realm. Back in the day, coaches used to coach based on the talent they had. Now they're specialized in this is how we coach, this is my style of play. So you have to get players that play your style of play so that you can get the most out of them and then the most out of what you're doing as a coach. And I think that's the realm we're in now as far as pro soccer, pro sports is we don't just, oh, well, here's my team. Let me see what I got and let me work with it. You basically specialize your team based around exactly how you coach and the philosophy that you're bringing forward. And I think that's what Washington did. They know their philosophy. They know what they're trying to prove. They know what they're going to try to play like. And that's why they went with this speed and ability to play different positions and ability to get up the field because I think they're going to be an attacking style of play. And I think it's going to be fun
Totally.
in the end, NWSL.
And that tiki-taka style that Heraldes is gonna bring to DC as well. Like it's gonna be somewhat similar to North Carolina in the sense that they do wanna control the ball a lot. And when I watched Bethune play, I called one of her games against Florida this season. She did kind of play more of a false nine. Like she did drop into the midfield. So she might be able to fill that gap that Sanchez left
You'd
when she
have to
headed over
think
to
that that's what they were doing.
Right, right. And to me, it's kind of crazy that, and this takes nothing away from what Sitnor and King are as players. You mentioned it before we got on air. Kind of crazy that Bethune was still on the board for that third pick just because she is so versatile and has proven herself so much in the college game. Also being able to play at two schools. Like she came from Southern California, went to Georgia to finish her career. So I think that also shows her ability to play with multiple different teams. She fits well into different systems. She's a team player. And those are some things that are hard to differentiate from other people when maybe someone plays at Clemson their entire life, for
Correct. I
example.
agree. And I think that's what's hard with the draft. I mean, granted, there's a lot of great players, but some of them are coming from systems that just fit them or were almost designed for them and why they were recruited at schools. And then you come into this pro ranks and you have to now take your credentials or your abilities and do you fit the system of the team you're coming into. And sometimes, you see it in other sports. They're not the superstars in college, but then they get into the pros and their game just fits the pro game so much better than college because college is much more regimented. It's very much more set. It's a system. Whereas sometimes, yes, we get into a pro system, but it's also what your personal abilities are and how the system molds and fits around the abilities of the player also. And I think that's right. Coming from USC, she played in one system with certain types of players. And then to go to Georgia and be just as effective, if not more effective, with a different system and different types of players, that shows her versatility as a player.
For sure. And before we move away from DC and get into the Mallory Swanson deal of it all, with Heraldes not coming until 3 months into the season, that's hard when you have an interim head coach who doesn't maybe know Heraldes yet. We don't know who that interim head coach is. But if you were Heraldes, how much can you have your eye on what's happening in DC, but also filling out your duties in Barcelona and making sure that team's successful and set up for success when you leave it. What is that give and take when you owe two teams kind of like 100% of yourself?
Yeah, I don't know that I could do it. I really don't know that I could do it personally. And it's a hard because of the NWSL, the way the seasons runs and the dates, and the European season runs and the dates. And as a coach, you're looking to, just as players, go on to this journey that you're on to become a better coach, a better knowledge of the game. So it's going to be super hard for him because you want Barcelona to succeed and you want to leave them great and you want to be walking into a situation that is exactly how you want it. That's why you took the job. So that's going to be a real tricky thing for him to be able to conquer, in a sense, with players he doesn't know, players he kind of knows, and then with Barcelona, with players he's leaving, which they all have a relationship, and you built a team that is, when you watch them play, that there must be a great locker room atmosphere, and he's got to be a huge part of that culture. So are they upset that he's leaving? Is he upset that he's leaving? So that's going to be a real tricky little thing for him to navigate, coming in so late into a season in such a competitive league. Because let's be honest, the European leagues are great, but they're not parity wise as good as the NWSL top to bottom. So there's going to be some games, there's going to be some things in Barcelona where you can change your lineup, you can do this, because the competition is just not as good at the bottom of the league as it is at the top. Whereas in the NWSL, from 1 to 14, we got, they're great. They're great players, and anyone can beat anyone on any given day. And the league proves that over and over each year.
I think too, with Utah and Bay coming in, they're gonna keep that standard with what we've seen come out from these GMs, these coaches, the people that they've hired to take over these teams. That standard's still going to be there, and they're still going to get that parity because there is so much talent here in the States from the college level and even in free agency and what that provides. Mallory Swanson was a big piece of that free agency. It came out that Swanson has 4 more years in Chicago. It is a long-term deal, but Chicago didn't disclose exactly what the financial terms of it were. CBS reports the contract is potentially worth close to $2 million, would put her making $400,000 a year. Now, Swanson has youth experience with Lauren Donaldson, who will take over as head coach this season. And this last caveat, which I think is really important for people to know is Swanson's husband, Dansby Swanson, has a 7-year, $177 million contract with the Chicago Cubs he signed back in December of 2022. So he's in Chicago. Personally, I didn't see Mallory wanting to leave that area either. I don't blame her. And it's a great fit. You're going to be playing for your former coach as a youth player. What do you think of this deal for Swanson and how this is going to play out, not just for her, but for free agency down the road and some of these players who haven't even signed yet?
I think it's great for Swanson. I think there's a lot of things that go into it, and bringing up her husband, I think, is a key thing. So when I was a younger player and I went to Europe as a foreigner and an American foreigner, because I wasn't from the area, didn't know the land, didn't have a car, didn't have an apartment, they would have to pay me more than a player that was probably going to play more minutes than me, who was local to the region. So for her, when your husband's making crazy
Damn
money
near
like
200
that,
mil.
there's no reason for her to sign for anything less than what she honestly thinks she's valued at. And for Chicago, she's a huge value. Coming off an ACL, you would have thought would have gave them a little apprehension, but it doesn't, because of what she means to the community, of what she means to the team, of what she means. And you saw players leaving Chicago, and they're losing some big names, but they need to keep her. And in doing so, they needed to sign her to a very lucrative deal. And this is where the Maria Sanchez contract comes into play. It starts setting a standard. So now these other players are going to say, well, she signed this, and I'm this valuable to this organization, and this is what I want. And that's the snowball effect of contracts. And that's why certain players have to know their value and then fight for it. And they're not necessarily fighting for their own contract, they're fighting for the groups coming in behind them. It's like the quarterbacks in the NFL. These guys, like Baker Mayfield, next year is not going to be making $4 million a year. He's not. He's going to get his normal NFL quarterback, where these guys are making $30 million. They're not superstars, but that's the going rate for a starting quarterback. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the NWSL is there are certain players that know their worth, and they're starting to get these bigger contracts, which is going to start to change how the landscape of contracts has worked, which is going to make every GM's job a lot harder. And coaches' jobs are going to be a lot harder because you can't miss on these contracts because there's just too much money. There's too much value in there. And then because of this big value and big money with the salary cap, now you're going to have to put pieces together behind it who those players aren't super upset that they're not making 400,000 and they're still going to try to work their way to get those kind of contracts. So very kudos to her. She deserves it. She was playing at that type of money before the injury. Now you just got to hope that when she comes back, she's the same player, because what she was before the injury was she was our best player in the U.S. I think she was our best player on the national team at the time. So hopefully the injury and everything, and Chicago's there. They're seeing her rehab. They're part of the rehab process and what she's going through and how she's coming back and how she's getting better. So it's like good news for us as fans too. If you're going to be willing to give her $400,000 a year, she must be pretty good on her rehab and close to being back to full 100%.
Chicago lost some key players. You mentioned, Kayla Sharples left. Casey Kruger left, Tierna Davidson left, who, I don't know if Davidson, she's a big loss, but she didn't play last season for Chicago. Swanson up top before her injury was really doing everything by herself. And this league has grown to a place where you can't really do that anymore. You can't just have one player being the sole facilitator in the attack. So it was actually Chicago who had that third pick in the NWSL draft, and they traded it away for Sam Staub, which is a huge get for the Red Stars. But they missed out on Croy Bethune. What do you think that was a good decision by Chicago? Should they have gotten another forward for Swanson to play with, or having a back line is kind of where they need to start in order to rebuild the club?
I was a defender, so and I still am the big
You're
believer
biased.
of the defense wins championships. But now we're talking
Okay.
about Lauren Donaldson too. So he has always
Yeah.
put together teams. Anytime you've ever seen him coach a team, he has put together a really good team that the team builds and feeds off of each other. So I'm sure there's things we don't know about, and there might be diamonds in the rough that they have up top, but with getting stopped to me is a huge, like, when that draft went through and that trade went through, I was like, wow, man, that's a hard player to let go. That player, she's a veteran in it. She like never misses a game. She's a great leader. She's a great player. She's dangerous on free kicks. She's an organizer. So like that made me think, wow, what does Washington know that we don't know to be getting rid of these players that they're getting rid of? And who are they bringing in to replace them? And then getting her at Chicago, I think he's going to, I got one in the back. Now I got one up top. Now let me fill in all the other pieces. And I think that's kind of when you watch Donaldson's teams, that's the way. It's a real team oriented. When you watch Jamaica in the World Cup, they had good players. They didn't have great players all over the place, but they all kind of fit together and worked together and knew how they worked as a team. And I think that's kind of what we can expect from Chicago, to bring out the best of your superstars.
Right. I could definitely see that. I think Nesbitt is one of those players who's a good team player. Like we saw her at Florida State, and kind of the comments she made when I was talking to her at the actual draft. Like she just is a go-getter. She wants to work hard. She wants to put her head down. And that's what Chicago needs, is they've got a lot of good young players, but bring in a talent like her, bring in a Staub who has that experience. And Coach Donaldson, he's a phenomenal coach, but he's a great person and a great communicator. And I think he's a good fit for Chicago. And when you're Mallory Swanson and you've had experience since you were a little girl playing underneath Donaldson, that's going to give you so much comfortability to kind of voice your opinions and say, hey, I think we should do this, or we should try this, or the last coach tried this and it didn't work. Chicago's a team that I would definitely be keeping an eye on this season. We saw what Gotham did last year for
I
sure.
think with where Chicago was the prior 2 years, probably the coach they needed was Donaldson, because as good of a coach he is, he's probably a better person. And that's exactly what they needed. They need some stability on the front of, this is a good person who's looking out for all of our best interests. The club, I'm not just part of the management. I'm part of the entire, the whole thing, to make us a whole complete team, a whole complete organization. I think they got the right guy for the job there. Now, how it all plays out, nobody knows but the soccer gods. But I think they got the right person for the job, for
I
where
do
they
too.
were and where
Donald.
they're looking to go.
Right, right. Finishing at the bottom of the table. I don't think it could get really any worse than last year went for Chicago with the injuries after injury after injury, and then not being able to score goals. This will be an exciting year for them. You mentioned free agency and brought up a really good point with Swanson, this $400,000 potentially a year for the next 4 years. This new free agency, this new salary cap that's been set by the league, $2.75 million per team. I called some of the draft. I didn't call it. I interviewed some of the players and was there on the broadcast. And we got to talk with all the coaches and GMs before the draft started. And everyone was fantastic, gave some really great information and really good insight. One information and nugget that I thought was really interesting is we were talking to Bay FC and their new GM and how has this process been? I'm sure it's been, someone asked, I'm sure it's been pretty easy to get draft or people to come into the area. And they're like, actually, it's super hard because even though we don't technically live in San Francisco and we're not in the Bay, it's extremely expensive to live here compared to living in Houston, compared to living in Florida. And I asked her, do you think you've lost people because of what you're offering them financially and they don't want to do that? And she said, indirectly, I think we might have. So I think it's a really interesting conversation to have about, yes, has the salary cap continued to increase and it's at a great number? Of course. But we put a team, not just one team. We've got 3 teams in California who are competing with the salaries in North Carolina, in
Kansas
Texas,
City.
Kansas City. It's difficult to do. And the argument is, okay, these players get their travel paid for, they get meals paid for, they get housing paid for, but people got to invest your money. Like, it's not just about the now in life, it's about your retirement, and you still want a few bucks to put away. How do you think this will play out in the future for the Bay?
I think it's a great thing to look at. When I was going to play in the MLS, and there was only I've been offered 5 times to play in the MLS, and I turned all 5 down. 2, I was very, very close. One time I was getting ready to go to Colorado, and then Coach Meyernick passed away, and he was the reason I was going there. So once he passed away, I said I'm not coming. That was the only reason I was going, was to play for him. But when you sign with a single entity, which the NWSL is, and times are changing and things are getting a lot better, but a lot of it you sign before you know where you're going sometimes. So like the first time I was offered a contract, I think I was offered like 66,000, which was a pretty decent contract at the time. But I said because I wasn't even dealing with a team, I was dealing with the league. I said, that's a great contract if I play for the Wizards at the time, Kansas City. If I play there, but I said, but if I go to San Jose, or if I'm in New York, playing for the Metro Stars, which is where I thought I was going to go because I'm a local. I was from New Jersey. I said, I'm owing money at the end of the year. Like can't save money. I can't live anywhere. And they were like, well, doesn't your parents live in New Jersey? And I was like, but I don't want to live with my parents. I'm a professional soccer player. I'm an adult. So I think that has a lot to do with where players then, when they become free agents, where they look also to play. Yes, they want a quality play, a team. They want a good culture. They want these things, but they also want to be able to save money and be at the end of their career, have something to fall back on while they get their next career started. So I think some of the teams, when you look at salary caps, and it makes sense in maybe the NFL because they're all making millions pretty much. They're all making these extraordinary amounts of money, but there's going to be players that are making very, very little. And then we have to have roommates and we have to live together and we have to have 6 girls together. And that isn't always the best environment for a team, because now you get into fights at home because somebody ate your food or somebody did this or someone's not doing their job with the chores. And then that goes into the locker room. So like, these are all things as clubs you have to look into and think about, based on, yes, the salary cap is the same for everybody, but the price of living is not the same for everybody in all these cities that we have. And we have some really good cities. And for me, I would want to live in Kansas City. It's the price of living is way better than LA. The price of living is way better than San Fran. The price of living is way better than New York or New Jersey. So based on, as a player where I go, I'm going to have to base my contract based on where I'm going also. So like if you're bringing me to Chicago, yeah, I need $400,000
Yeah.
and maybe a husband that plays baseball and I can fall back on that money too. So because Chicago's not cheap either, but great
No.
cities and like we have these really great markets, which great leagues need great markets. But then what comes along with great markets is the price of living is super high.
It's insane. It's insane. I was looking at the tax breakdown because now that I live in Charlotte, moving from California, and I even said it on the call, like you even see it. It's not just about the price of living when it comes to your apartment. Gas, food, taxes. Like if you made $150,000 living in the Bay Area, $50,000 would come out of your paycheck and go to the state of California. So technically you're only making 100,000, whereas in North Carolina, only I think 25,000 would come out, maybe 20,000. It's literally half of what California takes from you, or maybe that local area in the Bay takes from you. I think it's interesting. I think it's something that we'll definitely have to keep our eye on when it comes to the Bay, because they're going to have to get a marketer in there, someone who can, and they have a phenomenal GM who's doing a great job with all of that and handling the nuances of really trying to recruit players to come. But it is a topical. It does mean what kind of comes into play, and even Crystal Dunn going to she's going up to New York, like that means something. She's going back home, and players want to play where they're comfortable and where they want to be financially, where their friends are, what makes the best lifestyle decisions for them.
I did read an article by CBS Sports about them getting all those not draft picks, those free agents and how they went about it
Yeah.
at Gotham. And man, I have always been a Portland fan. That's who I always cheered for, just the style of play. But I'm going to be hard not to cheer for Gotham this year because what I read was they put a team together last year. And the team that they put together, not a team on the field, but they are constantly scouting players that fit their system, their style, their character. And then based on the rules of contracts, when you can talk to people, they interviewed all these players that they thought were going to fit their system. Not that they could sign them all, but it was about for really high caliber players. Money was the last thing that came to their what they really needed. It was about a good culture. It was about learning the game, learning different styles, being around players that will help them become better players, become better at the sport that they love. And there's just the way they go about the holistic way they go about their business, about putting a team together for the best of the game is really something. And when you look at Gotham, and then after you're reading this article, now granted, it was right after they win a championship, but you're like, that's how they went from bottom of the table to top of the table. It was
Yep.
taking this holistic view of what's the best thing for the growth of players, the club, all in it to help each other. And when you watch them play, it's exactly how they play. And then, the free agency goes and they get Davidson, Dunn, Rose Lavelle, Sonnet. Like, so when I know we were talking about like, how are they going to have all this money? Maybe money wasn't the determining factor that we all thought it was for some of these players. Now, granted, you're also talking about 4 national team players who have made tons of money on their bonuses and World Cup winnings and
Mhm.
endorsement deals. So it was probably a little easier for them to pick the Gotham, New York, New Jersey area. But I just thought it was really cool about how they went about their business of finding new players day in and day out. And they meet the coach is part of it, the GM, the assistant GM, and then they have people on staff that's their only job. And they're not just scouts and like call in. They're meeting constantly. As the season gets to the end, they meet twice a week. During the year, it's once a week. It's just a really cool process of how to make their culture the best culture it could possibly be.
Yale Averbush West has been the GM for that club and has done a good job of being patient with it. And with Juan Carlos Amoros, he's a great coach, a great person, somebody players want to play for. And you make a good point with like, how did they come up with all this money to pay not just those 4 players, but to also pay, Lynn Williams is on the team. I think losing Krieger was important in that piece to get the money. But also Rose Lavelle, sure, she's a great player. That is no argument. But she was injured a lot last season. And that means she's probably not getting paid as much because that's more of a risk Gotham is taking on her. So watching all these players come together, and how that will fit exactly what Averbush West is building at Gotham is going to be really exciting to watch and see how that kind of plays out this season. And one thing that Nejas said that I think is kind of true to what Gotham is doing as well is when you're talking about the draft, bringing in new free agents, it's not necessarily all the time about players who can instantly make an impact. It's about development and growth and trying to build a club that people want to go to get better and be able to perform when they kind of hit that peak in their career.
I agree. And looking at the Courage's, the moves that they made, I'm sure people are going to totally disagree with me
Well,
on
do you?
this. I think that the Weatherhall is the better one than Sanchez,
Yeah.
in my
Wait,
opinion. Sorry.
let's get into it before
Okay.
you go ahead because
All right.
I'll lead us right into it. So North Carolina made a lot of moves in the past week. Bianca St. George is coming over from Chicago. She's going to provide opportunities on the Witte that they didn't have last season. Obviously, Emily Fox is a massive departure to Arsenal from that left back position and what she provided on that flank. So Bianca St. George seems like a really good fit there. Then Ashley Sanchez comes over during the draft. She was traded from DC to North Carolina. Danny Weatherholt leaves Angel City to join the Courage. And then Feli Rausch from Wolfsburg. She's a German international player, has 36 caps with Germany. Comes over from Wolfsburg, who lost to Barcelona last year in Women's Champions League. She's only 27 years old. She is that big piece that has been teased for a while. How do you see this team taking form now that these next 1, 2, 3, 4 big pieces are added to North Carolina in the past few weeks?
To be honest, I have no idea. And only because 3 of those players can play multiple positions. St. George can be a winger, she can be an outside back. She can kind of sneak if you're playing a 4-4-2, she can get in part of that midfield also. Roush coming over, she's the same. She's been in the midfield for Germany. She's been in the back for Germany. She's for Wolfsburg. She plays in the back. She's played as a winger. So you're looking at now, granted, a couple of the articles that came out local are saying she's the piece to replace Fox. I don't know. And I think if we talk to Sean, he'd give us his kind of an answer that he always would give is like, how do you know where I'm going to play her? How do you know where she's going to be? You don't know what I'm thinking, which we don't. We
Fair.
don't know, but you're bringing in players and you went hard after outside backs right when you lost Fox. And it all happened real quick once Fox was determined, okay, she's going to Arsenal. Go ahead.
Let me just make one point off of that before you keep going. Nejas did say right before the draft, we knew that the Fox thing was being teased in the news, and he didn't speak to that specifically, but he said, just overall, we have a very good piece that we are excited about. And I think he was teasing Roush coming in for Fox, if I were to read into it. Like you said, we don't know, but the way he spoke,
Yeah, I would
that
think
is what
that
I'm
too,
thinking.
because the St. George, I think, happened right before the draft. I like a day before. I think it came right before, and it was pretty big news here. She's a Canadian international. She's a good player. She's been in the league. She's
Yep.
performed well in the league, but it wasn't like no. I don't think anyone here was like that's the fix to Fox because they're not really comparable in my opinion. But then the Sanchez thing happened during the draft night. Listen, I think Sanchez is a very, very good player. She is a very, very good 10, false 9 type of player. But we've seen the North Carolina Courage in Sean Nahas's system. You have to work, and you have to work hard off the ball. That's why the Japanese players do so well in the midfield. You have O'Sullivan, who I don't think anyone outworks her ever in a game. So bringing in Sanchez, you're almost thinking, is she going to be a 9, a false 9 in this system? Are they going to tinker the system just a tiny little bit? She has the technical ability to play in it. Does she have the work rate and the engine that she's going to need to work in it? Because you have to work in it. And there was a time there last year where the Courage they were keeping possession. They weren't doing much. And then Tess Bodie got on the field and recovered from her injury. And she was kind of like the catalyst of making the whole thing really go and work. I know that they have the Caroline, who is the danger, the weapon, you just almost can't stop her. But it was Tess Bodie's movement and work rate off the ball that started to really facilitate all the things and all the passing that was going. And there is no comparison, Tess Bodie's work rate and Sanchez's work rate. So that's the one I'm interested in seeing is how does that fit? What is the attitude that she brings in? She was in Washington. She was one of the stars. She even said it. She was heartbroken and shocked. Like, that's a hard thing when you're like, you think you have stability and you think you found your place and you found your niche, and then all of a sudden, gone. And that's when you realize,
Yeah.
wow, this is a business, and it affects every player differently. So that's the one that I'm looking at. And then, like I said, and I've always been a fan. Danny Weatherholt, I think, is another piece where you could slip her into any position. She might not be the best at that position, but she will make it work. She will get it done. She can come off the bench. She's not going to be a problem in the locker room. I think that's a huge pickup for the Courage. And I think that she's a player that you can really set your culture around. And I think that was one of their better pickups in the free agency market.
Totally agree with the weather hole. And to top that, last season, O'Sullivan was that leadership piece. Like, she was the piece that had the experience that everyone probably really relied on her in the locker room. Now Weatherholt's going to be able to take some of that off her shoulders and be able to be like that co-captain for O'Sullivan, so that it's not just that main focus on O'Sullivan. And I think that's a huge piece for Nahas to have in the locker room. Like you said, she can play all over the midfield. And even Nahas said we don't need a ton of depth in the midfield, but it's always good with this being Olympic year to have more depth in down the middle of your spine. And like you said, having to replace Bodie, who's headed to the Bay, Sanchez is going to be able to do that for North Carolina. I think these are some really exciting pieces. I think St. George, I'm still kind of on, and I think none to her fault necessarily. Chicago was a really hard system to perform in last year, and now that maybe that she's on a team that's been proven, they're proven underneath this coach, there's proven key pieces. She has some more excitement also with this being Olympic year, kind of gearing up for that as well. It will be fun to see how these pieces work out, but they all have that technical sound and that technical piece. And adding a player from Wolfsburg is huge for the NWSL. Having German eyes on this league, we've seen some players coming over from different European countries, but Germany is not a piece off the top of my head, really, that I don't think we've been able to see how that fits in the system. And I think that's good for future players who have been thinking about it. If she has a great experience in North Carolina, we could see more in the near future.
I think we're seeing a little bit of exactly what Emily Fox was talking about when she left. She said she wanted to take her game and learn a different style, a different play. She also talked about the atmosphere in the stands, which I think as the NWSL keeps growing, it's just going to keep getting better, and we're going to have that same kind of atmosphere. But I think it's cool that you're seeing European players come to this side and say, can I play at this pace? Can I play at this physicality with this skill, with all that? And I think that's where it's getting really interesting. And you're talking about not just Germany, Wolfsburg. They just played in Champions League final, and she's now picking NWSL, which I think is really a telling mark that eyes are on us. We might not know it. We might not see it. It might not be all the media eyes, but the players are watching this league. We had what's-her-face come from Real Madrid after the World Cup last year and play for Gotham.
Astaire.
Yeah. So we are seeing European players start to come over. We're seeing some European players come over and they realize, okay, this is not the game for me. I'm not at this level of athleticism sometimes. And then they go back. But now we're seeing some of these, and I really enjoy the German women's game, and I think it would be a good fit in the NWSL. So maybe some more will come over depending on how this goes. And the other thing that Sean's done in North Carolina is competition breeds excellence. And now you got a whole bunch of outside backs looking to get a spot. You got a whole bunch of good midfielders looking to find their spot, and they're just going to be able to continue to grow and be good and get better through their own competition and training. And I think that's what's interesting about this league is they're all over the league, is the competition and fighting for spots because there's so many good players. St. George, I think she's going to enjoy it here more because it's more fun to play as a defender when you're on the attack a lot too. So last year was just defending and defending and defending. We don't really know what else she could do except defend because that's just the way Chicago's season went last year. Now she'll be able, can she get forward? Can we see parts of her game that we haven't been able to see just because she was in a different environment? The NWSL thing is we are all watching and talking, and it's all about players. Emma Hayes is coming to the U.S. to coach our national team, which means Chelsea will not have a coach. And all reports out of England is Chelsea wants a women coach to succeed her. And high names on the list are Casey Stoney and the young lady in Seattle. So are we going to
Laura
see
Harvey.
coaches? Yeah. Are we going to see coaches moves now going over? And now the coaches are also asking for more money and getting their money and getting what they're worth and getting what they're due. So I think we're going to see some coaches changes recently, or at least they're going to be looked at, which is going to put a little bit of ambiguity into some of these teams of who's going to be coaching us coming into the future, because Chelsea has already stated, we already know Emma Hayes is coming, and Chelsea has stated they would like to keep the locker room and the attitude and everything the same, and they think a woman coach is what they need to continue their progression forward. And we have two of the best sitting here in the U.S. who are both have English descent and could go back home. So
Laura
that's
Harvey,
thing.
I think will stay in Seattle with the rebrand, with what she's built, with the players that she's so comfortable with. Seattle seems like the place that she's wants to be in. Stoney, I think that's fair. The only argument that I heard against that I think is fair is she has a wife and 3 young kids that are finally here in the States. And not is she in North Carolina, which is literally just over the pond. Like, she's across the United States. Right. That's a long haul back to England. And if her kids are comfortable playing for the surf in San Diego, having fun, and they want this American experience for a little while longer, Alex Morgan being on that team, and I could see Morgan being like, please stay for one more year, a few more years. But that would be the first one off my draft board if I'm Chelsea, really fighting for her.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think it's interesting because we're seeing it now in the NWSL, and coaches are coming into the league from overseas. I got a feeling it's going to start to work its way, and it's good for the game. To be honest, it's really good for the game. It's good. It makes everybody raise their level, and I think that's the best thing that we could have as far as players, as far as coaches, as far as fans. So I just think it's very interesting. In North Carolina, as I'm a fan of North Carolina, I'm holding my breath until the European window closes, because I don't know how European teams don't go after O'Sullivan. And I would pay, if I was a GM over there, I would pay a lot of money to get O'Sullivan onto my team.
I would too, for a lot of reasons, not just the playing reasons, but also the person reasons. She's young. She can contribute so much, as we saw last year. Before we head into a little bit of MLS news, out of all the players who went into the draft, who did you expect to go a little bit higher?
Who did I expect to go a little bit higher? I really thought, and she went pretty high, so this is like a little bit weird, but what's the girl from BYU? I think she's another one.
Brecken Mazingo.
Yeah, and
Fourth low.
think, with Utah being the number 1 pick, and I understand, I'm not nothing against Sentnor, nothing against her, but she's not. You could have picked a BYU player who already has a little bit of a fan base and helped start, and you're not really sacrificing talent at all. And just when you watch her play, she's an exciting player. The things she can do with the ball at her feet. I was expecting her to go a little bit higher, and I think she went 5th or something like that. I don't know what she went, but she went 4th. I thought she was going to go 1. I really thought that she was going to be the number 1 pick because it was Utah's pick. So I was a little surprised. And again, that's like, we don't know these draft boards and everything. And I think she ended up going to Utah, right? She ends up at Utah.
Yeah.
So like, they might have known, oh, so-and-so wants this, and so-and-so wants this, and somebody wants this. So for me, but I just think her and the girl from Georgia, I just thought those were the two most pro-ready players. It's hard. It's not taking anything away from Carolina, but good God, Carolina, like, they got 6 players going to draft, and they probably have younger players that still want to stay in school that could have went in the draft. Like, they're just talent after talent after talent after. Oh, guess what Carolina's going to have next year? Talent after talent after talent. I know a whole bunch of girls went in the portal or did whatever, but some of them know they're not getting playing time because the next recruiting class is better than the one prior. It's a school in soccer and basketball that just recruits itself, basically. So that's where you like, when I look at some of the Carolina girls coming out, are they ready to go into an environment that's not Carolina, basically, that doesn't have the best player in every single position all the time? That was just, for me, is when I look at certain players, and that's not just soccer or this draft, that's any draft. Like, certain players, like, I don't know, why are the Alabama quarterbacks winning all the national championships but don't really do well in the NFL? Because they don't have the same talent level around them compared to the talent level on other teams. That's just when I look at these drafts and players coming out, you got to look at players like, where could they succeed if they were the best and the rest was not as good around them?
Yeah,
And
that's a
we
really good
don't ever
point.
get to see that with the Carolina girls because every position is good and every backup is good,
Yes,
just great. Like everybody's just great. Like
right.
that's like I'm an NC State guy, so like NC State had one player drafted, and that's
James.
right. That's who should have been.
Yeah.
That's all we had. That's all we got. But Carolina,
Yeah.
six of them went. Six of them went. It's
And the NC
ridiculous.
State girl will be successful where she goes because she's used to being the best and she's used to having to prove herself against her competition. And that's why these later round draft picks, or even the girls who don't get drafted, are going to maybe be long term the best players in this league because they know that they have to work hard to really solidify their spots. And I'm not saying these top 10 girls don't. They know that. They're professionals. They've been through the college game. But when you're looking long term, those are the girls I have my eyes on. You made a good point about Mazingo, and it's the fact that she's from Utah. She's from the Mormon community, and she's even said herself, like, she wants to be in Utah. She was posting like a bunch of stuff on her Instagram, like all these people who are excited for her, like getting those butts in the seats in Utah is important to continue to build that fan base who's coming back into the league. And she's a stud. Like, she can play on her left foot, her right foot. She can shoot from anywhere. She's a great person. In the few minutes I got to speak with her, she's got phenomenal style, Scotty. Like, her red lipstick, I was so impressed. I don't know what was more impressive, her red lipstick perfectly put on her face or her soccer skills. But all jokes aside, I think she's a really good addition to Utah and really to this league. And for BYU to prove themselves in the last few years and having 8 draft picks in this NWSL draft, it's so impressive. And I'm really excited for that school, for that coach, and for these girls who got drafted this past week. MLS news. A lot happening. We're in preseason right now. The season starts in about a month. The biggest news coming out of this past few weeks for me was our favorite is Brandon Vasquez leaving Cincinnati after 4 years. He's on his way to Liga MX and is going to play for Monterrey. What does this do to MLS?
Um, I don't know that it hurts MLS too bad, to be honest. I think
Okay.
like being that it's Brandon Vasquez and he has
Yeah.
Mexican descent and he was a Chivas fan growing up. And so sometimes you make decisions to make family members happy too. And
Mm.
I'm dealing with a young player who's actually being looked at by Charlotte FC for their youth academy. And he asked me I've coached him for a long, long time. He was just asking me questions and I give him information, but I do my very best not to direct him in any way because every
Swayed him.
player's journey is their own. I know what I would have done, but that's not my call. That's this specific players. And I think that's the thing with Vasquez is here's a player who's probably grown up his whole life watching Liga MX. His parents are in it. They have teams. They're supporters of teams. So now for him to take his game, his ability, his trade, and try to make it in a different league to see if this is the right thing. And it could be the wrong thing for him. It could be the best thing for him. Who knows? But he's willing to take the risk. He was willing to take the risk last year to stay in Cincinnati. And now he's willing to take the risk to go to Mexico and play in this league. And for MLS, I don't know if they're mad or sad, but they have a deal with League MX. So how could it be that big of a problem? Because you made a
Sure.
deal with them, so why wouldn't we? They're also San Jose is losing Cade Cow
Yeah.
to Chivas. So like it's starting
Yeah.
to look like is this something where the two leagues are working in tandem to strengthen both leagues in a sense? We are going to
That's
take
fair.
Mexican players across. So for me, with two players of Mexican descent in them to go play in Mexico, it totally makes sense in a way. I don't know that it's the best thing for me personally. I don't know if that's the best thing for Cade Cal or not the best thing. I don't know if it's the best thing for Brandon Vasquez or not the best thing. My bigger concern would be because it's kind of the same, but in the background, what does this do for their U.S. national team.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like, how
That
does
is
this
because the U.S. national team can be very fickle.
right? Because I think what we saw this past season was Vasquez getting this opportunity, even Cade Cowell getting the opportunity with the national team. Like, super excited for him because an MLS player, has this opportunity, and not just an opportunity, but like he's a good player who could play well with these Premier League players, etc. So, does the U.S. look at him any differently now that he's not, that he's in Liga MX?
I would say this right now, no. If he doesn't perform well or starts to come off the bench, they will 100%. Now, in both scenarios, I think they're both players that the Mexican style of play fits. They like players out on the flanks that run at players. They like big, tall forwards that put the ball in the back of the net. That's Mexico's MO. When they're really good, that's kind of how their style of play is. They get the ball out wide. They have one-on-one dribblers, and then they get crosses into these big, tall, strong finishers. So I think both of them made a good choice in a sense of it kind of fits their style of play. But I could see if either one of them struggles a little bit, that they will then stop getting their phone calls from the national team with really no say of to why they are or aren't getting these calls. But I got a feeling that both of them are going to do okay. I think both of them are going to do pretty good in the Mexican League. I think they're going to find it enjoyable and suiting to their style of play, which
And there's
my guess is that's probably how they were raised anyway, coming
right.
from where they come from and
And they're
their
still
background.
they're really young players too. So I see this as a life experience, right? You want to go, you want to get this experience while you're young. They're still at the prime of their career, but it's not like they can't come back. And it's not like they're not a part of it. You mentioned the connectivity between the two leagues. There's going to be that Leagues Cup Championship tournament again this season. So we're going to see them a lot in MLS still. Just thought it was an interesting move and not one that I expected for him to make.
I
But
think the more interesting move, and again, every player's is his journey, it was Robinson picking Cincinnati
yeah, that's a
instead
good
of
one.
going to Europe. That was to me was the more, and I don't know the player, I don't know him personally. I just thought, wow. I mean, I would have thought stay in Atlanta or go or go
Go
overseas
overseas.
because he had offers and he had good. Like I'm pretty sure PSV was one of his offers, and just watching what Serginho Dest has gone through. Now, granted, he's not an American that lives in America, but he is an American player who's been jumping around from club to club to club, and now he's really finding his groove at PSV and playing really stellar soccer. And they were one of the clubs looking at Robinson, and I just felt like, man, if it was me, I would have went to Europe to see. I already know I can play in the MLS. I already know it. I know it. So I don't know if it was a financial thing. I really don't know. I know he got a good hunk of change from Cincinnati. I don't know if it was a comfort thing, but that one was more play with my brain a little bit than these guys going to the Mexican League.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. That is interesting. And I think the latter might be true for a lot of people. Like you get comfortable somewhere. Maybe he has family here that he doesn't want to leave. And that makes sense to some people too. It's more than just about soccer sometimes in people's careers. It could just be about his season of life. But it'll be fun to see how it all plays out.
One little thing, and it just came out. It just came out on social media. So now we got to keep
What?
our eye on this silliness. But Neymar is wherever he's doing his rehab. Him and his wife had a picture, and he held up a Miami uniform.
What? On Instagram?
Whatever he was on, I don't know where I saw it, Instagram or Twitter or whatever. But everyone was commenting, "Oh, no way, this could not possibly happen." And then, what are the rules that they're going to make up in the MLS to allow this possibly to happen? Now, there's been no talk of it through league sources or anything. It was just a social media, and that's just when you look at that. It was Neymar, Messi, and Suarez were like the three amigos in Barcelona. And now Suarez is there, Messi's there, Busquets is there, Jordi Alba's there. I just thought
Yep.
it was, and it just goes like to me a little bit of like if I'm a GM in the league, I gotta be thinking, how do I compete with Beckham? It's
Right.
impossible. He knows everybody at every level. He's everywhere. He was at the game in Paris for the basketball game. Um,
Yeah.
that
So is
was
everybody else.
yeah. Everybody who's anybody was there.
Literally. I'll have to keep my eye on that. I can't find it with a light Google search, but we'll see if there's more behind that
Yeah, I
next
just thought
week.
it was because
Before.
that's kind of how the Suarez thing popped into play too. It was just a
Right.
picture of him with a Miami shirt, and then it spiraled into now Suarez is in Miami, so that's interesting. And a little
That
bit of
is interesting.
NWSL sort of news that I would like to see how this goes over because it kind of happened real sneaky. But Gavin Wilkinson, the former GM of the Portland Thorns and Portland Timbers, was hired
Yep.
by Kansas City, Sporting Kansas City,
Sporting
which
KC.
holy, if I was a Sporting KC fan, which I'm not, I wouldn't be anymore. I would not
That's
be
my
anymore. I would
that's my
not be
red
anymore.
flag. No, not red penny. That is my red card of the year. Like, how, with all of what we've been able to achieve in soccer here in the States with making sure things are done right, how did that happen? Literally.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. But here we are.
yep.
And
I
we'll
was,
see
I
how
was
that plays out.
when I read that, I was like shocked.
Same.
What's it been a
Especially
year?
Sporting
Been a year?
KC too.
I think maybe that's they thought they could get away with one because the market's kind of small. I don't like. I couldn't think of
You
any
have a
reason.
women's league in your city. Like, if you were
Yeah,
I
I
don't
didn't
even
get
know
it
now,
either. I tell you, I
Montreal.
didn't. I will say this for him, and I played against Galvin, and I know him. I'm not like we're not like best friends or anything. Like our paths have crossed many times. In one of his interviews, I thought he did well in the interview, but I wouldn't really be asking him the questions.
Right.
I would take a job too after that debacle I was a
Yeah,
part of. I need to make money
totally.
for my family too. It'd be more of like the organization. Like how is this okay with you? How
Yeah.
is this like? Do you not have daughters? Do you not have wives? Do you not like? I understand it's a men's league, a men's team, but it doesn't matter.
But
Like you
women
have
work
women
for the
fans.
club.
You have right. You have a Kansas City team in the NWSL, like right here. You would think you guys should be like trying to help each other out, get fans, and be work together. Like I was shocked at that one. Oh, I was more
Yeah.
shocked at that one than. Granted, nothing has come from it, but I don't know if anybody noticed, but Arena's been reinstated in the MLS, and he could get a job. Now we have no idea what he did or why he was suspended, but
Right.
and that's the one thing I like about the NWSL. They're way more transparent with everything.
Right.
They probably could
Right.
be better, but they're shockingly good compared to the MLS.
Right. Right.
So-
We know where everyone kind of stands when they're coming out of that league and why they shouldn't be hired again, or maybe why they should get a second chance. Good call, Scotty. I totally forgot to bring those two up. Honestly, there is just so much news that we weren't able to catch up on it all this week, but we will eventually get to all the important stuff because we'll be here every single Wednesday. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. It's at SFTP Pod. And we'll be back on Wednesdays. You can watch us every week on YouTube. If you could give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, that would just help us so much to get more eyes on our show. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Have a great week.